well after that.
2 weeks pay now.
So, we're going to do some work on an API wrapper. What's the first thing we're going to do?
An API wrapper.
We've got an API wrapper that we're going to do some work on.
Oh.
So what's the first thing we're going to do?
Run tests.
Even better than that, let's check XKCD. Just because, you know, start of a new day. Let's see, Alt X, XK. Premature optimization. Maybe we shouldn't have done that right now. Okay. With this API wrapper, it's written in Ruby, so hopefully you guys won't be too lost. Let's switch into the project and look at the file here. My workflow, I tried to do a get fetch first off, so let's do that. Space get fetch, and we'll pull from the origin. Get finished, you can see down there at the status bar. That's pretty cool. But it doesn't tell us if anything got pulled down. So let's do a get status. As you can tell, we're all at the same commit, so nothing different there. But we've got some unstaged changes. Could be that, you know, we're doing some work, don't really know the status. So what's the next thing we do? Run our test suite. Good answer, guys. Good answer. So let's do that. Space MTA. Wait for that. That kind of looks like failure to me there. But yeah. Esponse. Ooh, that's nice. I think somebody misspelled it. Let's fix that here. And run our test suite again. Same issue. Probably somebody was doing some copying and pasting. It is my work machine, but I'm not going to point blame at anybody, you know? Okay. Oh, Esponse, that's right. Okay, so there's that one. There's several of them in here. We could do a find and replace, but we're cooler than that. So let's use iEdit instead. So we've got this selected here. Space SE. See down here, 5 matches. And what we can do is make one change. And it changes in all 5 places at once. Well, let's see. And then now our test suite passes. That's great. Now we can actually do the work we're supposed to be here for. And that work just happens to be working on this function here called generate API key. Since you guys don't know where it is, there's a couple ways we can find it. We could do, you know, global find through all the files, or we can do jump to the definition with space mgg. No Ruby console rolling. Okay, there's the definition. Very cool. I wonder if that command works on other things like included gems. If we go down here, you can see we've got a class built on HTTP party, which is an external gem. So if we do space mgg, sure enough, let's close this sub window here. Sure enough, we're actually inside the gem looking at the source code. Now, the next thing we got to do, well, actually, let me go through my workflow a little bit more before we get into the actual coding here. My workflow often consists of opening a REPL and playing around with some code. So how about we do that? Space MSI to get it started, space MSS to get it running. All of a sudden, we have a full REPL inside of our editor with the API wrapper already loaded up. We can do other things like, we can open up a shell. I'll use ZSH. And there's my full ZSH shell inside of Emacs. The other sort of thing we can do is we can switch to a different language and try some stuff. Let's get out of there. We have, for instance, an Elixir variant of this wrapper. So let's take a look at that for a second. Switch over to the project, start typing Elixir, open up a test. Now, if you remember, we used space MTA to run the test suite last time. Run at this, hit the same keystrokes here. Sure enough, we get our test suite again. We used space MSI to start up our REPL last time. And sure enough, we got a REPL there too. Same commands for git, naturally, because it's git. Get that closed out here. Okay. We've run over a lot of functionality pretty quick. We've seen git integration, Vim key bindings. We had, with the search, we were actually using... Oh, we didn't do a project search. Man, totally forgot that. So we can do a project search. Okay, so let's do that. We can search for this function use cassette. Highlight it, hit space SP, and it'll show us all the places where search use cassette is being used, being referenced there. That's AG. It also fall back to ACK or grep, depending on what your system has installed. Basically, all this is stuff that you've seen you can use in Vim, you can use in Emacs proper, you can use in Sublime, anything. So what is Spacemacs and why is it so special? Really glad you guys asked that, because that's what I'm going to answer here. Now, Spacemacs is actually a starter kit for Emacs. Loads up a whole bunch of configuration right off the bat. If I had my notes up here, that would also help. It's focused around, the project itself is focused around a couple different things. One of them is mnemonics. If you noticed, when I hit commands for a project, like space pp to switch projects, project starts with P, that's cool. All the commands for buffers, they're under B. All the commands for Windows are under W. It's focused on discoverability. In case you hadn't noticed, this box here, that's not normal Vim, that's not normal Emacs. That is a Spacemacs specific tool to allow you to discover stuff, to know where you are in the flow of commands and figure out what you can do next. And it's also focused on consistency. We use the same commands across different languages to run the same sorts of functionality. It's built by a whole bunch of power users who make this for themselves, and they're regularly updating it and fixing it, which is pretty slick. Now, to give you just a quick background of Spacemacs, what they start out doing was trying to take the lessons from the best text editors of the past 30 years, Vim and Emacs, combine them together and make the best thing they can come up with. They used Emacs as a base because it's incredible. In fact, Emacs has been described as the best as a great operating system lacking only a great text editor, which is what Vim brings to the table. Vim, there's a mode inside of Emacs called Evil Mode because of the whole Holy War thing, and that Evil Mode is an almost perfect implementation of Vim inside of Emacs. I just use some super basic Vim commands, but anything you can do with Vim, straight up Vim, you can do inside of Evil Mode. And it just works really well. So now we got that out of the way. Installation is pretty easy. Just a git clone, set up Emacs itself. If you guys want to try that afterwards, I'd be glad to help. We're not going to go over that here. The only thing you do need to know starting out is that Spacemacs uses the concept of layers to get itself going. For instance, when you're looking at the main configuration file, it does not come with any layers enabled. These layers here, Emacs, Lisp, Git, Markdown, these are all things that I put in myself to actually get the functionality going. In fact, the first time I opened a file, it had no syntax highlighting. I was like, every other text editor I've ever opened has had syntax highlighting out of the box for PHP. But a layer is more than that. It's not just syntax highlighting. It's also linters. It's also other tools. For instance, Go has a whole bunch of stuff built into it to make it more amenable to the Go environment. So when you get started, just enable a few. Don't do a whole bunch at once. Just try out with your different languages, start learning them, and it'll be great. Now we're going to look at where the magic actually happens, which is the spacebar. And we're just going to explore a few different panels so you can get a feel for how things work here. I've already mentioned the project panel. It uses a tool called Projectile. I'm just going to run through some commands, take a look at them, and move on. So one of my favorites is the fuzzy finder. It's very similar to any other fuzzy finder you've used in like Sublime or Vim's Control P, whatever. You type in part of the name, and it filters down and shows you the files. You can also do stuff like, sorry, let me back out of there, space P and then B to switch between your buffers. Now, you can have multiple projects open at once. And let me back up and tell you what a project is. A project is any folder that has files under source control. So you can have two files open from two different Git repos at the same time, and it views those as being in separate projects because they're in different Git repos. Using the space PB function allows you to filter out all the open buffers to just your current project. Because you could do, well, we'll get to that. We'll get to other ways of switching between buffers here in a minute. Also, keeping with the project panel, you can do your Neo tree in case you like having a sidebar. And that is full keyboard control, full mouse control. It's just Neo tree. Moving on to the search panel, we've seen one function already. Let's get that closed down here. The search panel, as you can see, we're using AG here. So we can do a project search. We've already seen that before. Let's take a look at maybe, let's get switch back to the Ruby one here for a second. And we'll do a project search for, okay, so we got YAML files up here, fixtures. Let's do a search for person. So we've got Ruby files, we've got a whole bunch of Ruby files, we've got some YAML files. Because this is AG, you can actually pass in AG switches, command line switches, to filter out the file types. Like, if we just want to see Ruby files, just -- Ruby, and all the YAML files are currently filtered out. If we had any Assassin here, I'd show you that too, but we don't. Also in search, if you wanted to limit your search to only the open buffers, you can do that with B. So right now we've only got this one buffer open from the CampMinder Ruby project, so pretty much anything we search for is only going to show that open buffer. Oh, we got the person test up too that is searching. So that goes cross project. Then there's search jump in case you like to be able to jump between functions. I'm using Control J and K, keeping within the Vim key bindings to actually navigate this panel down here. Then we've got something I just found out about, which is pretty cool, is the swoop command. So we can search for a thing again like person. It'll show you the file, as you can see here, the file, all the places that it exists, and when you switch between the results, it'll actually show you the context up here in case you've got a lot of files with very similar single lines. Not that we have a lot of defs, but you get the idea there. And then I mentioned it before, iEdit mode. It's just a fantastic little thing. If you use Sublime's multiple cursors, it's very similar to that, except that you've got all of Vim installed, or all of Vim available inside of iEdit mode. Literally, it just copies all your cursor commands from one place to all the others. Now, the last panel that we're going to spend a little bit of time looking at here is the buffer panel, which is, anybody guess what key that's under? Good job. So we've got, like I said, we can switch between all the open buffers across projects right now. If you notice, this is something cool that Emacs brings to the table. This Alchemist, let's see, this magic process down here. That's actually a background process that Vim doesn't do well, but Emacs has first layer support for it. So you can have multiple resources running for your different projects in the background without interacting with each other. Or this Alchemist server. That's a great feature of the Elixir integration there. Just looking at some other things. You can, when you're closing buffers, you can do your typical Vim command of :BD. You can also do space BD. It's one keystroke shorter because you don't have to hit shift and then colon. Whatever. There are a few other little details in there, but it's just kind of nice. Browsing between buffers, you can hit space B in for next, which is my scratch buffer for some reason. Space BP. BP to browse back and forth. I clearly don't have much open right now. One of the things that I ran into that was an issue first off was copying and pasting the entire file contents in and out of Emacs because it's not your typical GUI editor. Let's see, space B in. What you can do is you can hit space B, and then there are two commands here. P for copy entire clipboard, copy clipboard to whole buffer, and Y for copy whole buffer to clipboard. It works exactly like you would expect. It's just entire buffer out or entire buffer in. And then those are some of the general stuff. The one other thing that you'll want to know about Spacemacs in terms of this panel here is that anytime you switch between languages, you're technically switching modes. For instance, Ruby has a particular set of commands under space M because that's its major mode, M for major mode. You've got T for test, you've got B for bundle, you've got your G for goto, which is how we were jumping between method definitions earlier, and S for REPL. You guys want to see some like inline REPL stuff real quick? Okay, so let me make sure Ruby console is running here. Oh, sorry, wrong project. In this particular project, I'll often test out this other API that I'm working with by just running this whole file on the command line, Ruby file name. But I can also MSI. Hold on a second. I need to kill this one here. Okay, so we get this going here. This is a Rails project, by the way. Takes a minute to launch the console because Rails. Okay, so now what I can do is I can select the entire file. Very useful. And then do, okay, so now we hit into S for the REPL, and then R to send region and go. Doesn't look like it's doing anything, but hold on a second. There's the output that I would expect from running that file on the normal command line. So you can do this with any chunk of code that you visually highlight inside of your editor. Naturally, if you don't have your region set up, if you don't have your console set up right, it's not going to work right, but you can still do it. Okay, let me pop out of that here. It can get kind of weird if you got multiple consoles running. The last thing I want to go over with you guys is actually documentation. Documentation is fantastic with these guys. They have all their documentation on GitHub built into their repo. They have a great website, which you can, it's at spacemacs.org, and they've also got it in the editor. Guess what key that's under?
D.
H
Oh.
for help. Space H. There's a whole bunch of help commands, but we're going to go with Helm Spacemacs here, or space again. And sure enough, we've got the main documentation here. Go move on down a little bit, and we've got layer documentation. Remember what I was talking about? Layers aren't just syntax highlighters. This is how you can, when you're trying to get a layer set up and working, and it doesn't work right because stuff, you can go in here. Somebody throw me a language name.
Go.
Go. There we go. And here's our table of contents. This is org mode, if that means anything to you. Probably doesn't. Think of it as markdown. So get going. Here are your install instructions and what you have to do to get set up, and then how you use it, and then how you configure it. And then if we go down here a little farther, here are all your Go shortcuts, which you can get to through the panel, but it's right here too. Great little resource. And each layer is required to have this documentation before it gets merged into master, before it gets into release. So by default, you got this across everything. They've also got a great community. They have a Gitter chat, which is just a chat, online chat thing, hooked up to GitHub. And they usually have people wandering through there answering questions. I've had a number of my questions resolved and issues resolved talking to them. Yeah, there's a lot of other stuff we could go through, but I'm going to wrap things up here. I hope you've seen enough of Spacemacs to realize that they have done a great job binding together a whole bunch of different tools in a very accessible fashion. I think that makes Spacemacs great for beginners to the Vim Emacs world like myself. I hadn't played with Vim in years until last month. Or for professionals who are just getting kind of tired of config maintenance. I mean, these guys, they release once a month, and they're constantly working in the develop channel. So you got a lot of people at your back in your configuration files. I think that's fantastic. For myself, working with the great UI, the fantastic key bindings, and the integrated documentation has just been fantastic. The reason I'm sharing this with you guys is because I want you all to be more productive and to invest some in your tools. Spacemacs is an investment, but whether you invest in Spacemacs or the editor that you're currently using, either one is fantastic, and I would encourage you to do so, to dig out and find those dark corners of your editor with all those cool commands that you never knew were there. Thank you very much for your time, and if you have any questions, I'm here. Also, you can jump between normal files with like contact information.
All that wizardry was just a month of learning.
Yeah, mostly it's Spacemacs. Yeah, Vim is. I still hit random keys at random times and feel like the proverbial monkey with a hammer. But it's fun.
What was the main resource for learning? Was it just downloaded and go through the help documentation, or?
There is a tutor built in. I don't know if anybody familiar with Vim has heard of Vim Tutor. They have the evil tutor because things are evil in this world. Evil tutor? Yeah. So I actually ran a traditional Emacs command there. Don't look at me weird. Which was Alt-X. I always get that messed up. Which searches through everything. I should make one more comment here. You can do space question mark, and here are all your commands. Give me a command that you might use on a regular basis.
Well, I would like to open a random file that's not a project or anywhere else.
Cool. Right there. That's just a random file. That's an markdown
How
file.
do I do that? Or how do I find out how to do that?
Space, file, find. And then you have a browser. You hit Control H to go up a directory. Type in the name of the directory. You can type in the partial name, hit tab. For instance, what other crazy stuff do I have here? I have an Atom directory. There's my bash RC. That's actually when you're starting up and you're trying to get into a project, that's how you do it. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. Good question. Did I answer the other? Oh, yeah. Question mark. You can start typing this stuff like comment, and it'll show you the key binding to get there, and then the actual command. That's across not only Spacemacs, all the Spacemacs configure stuff, but also over the Emacs configure stuff, like that, whatever that stuff is. I don't know. Yeah. So anything else? Any other questions?
Once you have it installed, how do you start it?
Emacs.
Okay, it just starts as part of it?
Yes. Yeah, as a starter kit, it takes over the entire Emacs configuration directory, and then you actually configure Spacemacs with its own .spacemacs file.
That must be where I have it.
Yeah. There's a command to install the .spacemacs file or something. I'll take a look at it here in a second with you. It gets a little funky sometimes. There is a
Do you use
command.
your vimRC if you're in evil mode, or
No.
do you have to use a different config file?
Yes. So when I hit space F E D, which is find dot file, I've got my file under version control, which most people won't initially. So this is the main configuration file. There's okay. The only real relation to Vim in this instance is actually down at the bottom, where there's a user configured section, and this is where you throw your Emacs specific stuff that hasn't been configured somewhere else in a more Spacemacsy format. So web mode does not play fantastic right now inside of Spacemacs. They're working on it, which is why I have some web mode specific stuff here. But yeah, it completely ignores your Vim installation because I have Vim installed in different configurations separately with that. Yep.
How's your list now?
I look at those parentheses and I'm like, oh, cool, whatever. Moving on.
Does Lisp not close quotes or something? I was looking through the configuration file. There's single open quotes everywhere,
Yeah,
and then a new line. And it's just like continuing on.
I think so. I think that indicates that the following is a string. Based on my
Yeah.
configuration of this file, that is the only experience I have with eLisp.
Yeah, that's kind of how I was. It was like, yeah, you should set this to this if you want to do this. It's got all this documentation, and in order to get it to work, I had to use a single opening, single quote.
Yep.
Yeah, it looks
Ooh.
very wrong, but it works. So.
It's because the list was written back in the day when they tried to save as much
Yeah,
as
definitely.
possible. So.
Gotta save that bit.
Pretty
I
good
don't know.
with difference.
Yeah. Trade off. Trade off.
They're necessary.
Anyway, yeah. If there isn't anything else, I'll go ahead and unplug and we can move on.
All right.
Cool.
Thank you very much. That was
Thank you.
fantastic.
Thank you guys.